If there's one thing worse than a Baylor loss, it's an alarming Dave Aranda quote after the game. Let's get locked on Baylor.
You are Locked On Baylor, your daily podcast on the Baylor Bears. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello there, Bears fans. Welcome to another episode of Locked On Baylor, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team every day. I'm your host, Cam Stewart of ESPN Central Texas and the Cam Show on YouTube. Welcome to 2025, where I am proud to report that the Baylor football program is undefeated this year. Undefeated. This whole year. And of course, coming off a loss in the Texas Bowl to LSU yesterday. I think we've had the chance to sleep on it, so it's time that we ask the question now. Did LSU win the game? Did Baylor lose the game? We're going to ask that question. We're going to take a look at, Brian Kelly might have been right about something, and while it might not have made a huge difference, maybe it could have. The Bears were absolutely hosed in the middle of this game, and that could have really changed the whole complexion of this thing. All that and more coming up on this episode of Locked On Baylor. Thank you for sticking with me. I am battling through this. I'm sick as a dog right now, and it's not just because of watching that Texas Bowl yesterday. I have been warmed up by some of the great support that we've gotten from the Baylor fans. I almost got emotional at the end of the postgame, talking about the year in review and how much this channel has grown. And I've been super warmed up by all the LSU fans in the comments. I love that. No, seriously, like that's a ton of fun. I even had one or two apologize on Twitter. I'm like, don't do that. This is fun. And it's football. It's college football. Like, don't take this too seriously, except for when you take it too seriously. And you guys know that I take it probably too seriously. So I was upset last night after that Bears loss because I felt it was very winnable. And some might take that as a knock on LSU. I don't think so. I thought LSU played a great game. But I think if you watch that game from start to finish, it's tough to argue that Baylor had no shot in that game. They had plenty of opportunities to not just get in that game, but take a lead in that game and possibly win that game. And it didn't come down to just LSU imposing their will on Baylor, specifically after the first quarter. What it came down to was plenty of Baylor mistakes. And Dave Aranda was asked about that after the game, the questions, the mistakes, the execution, like how close was this for Baylor? And Dave, honest to a fault, obviously, gives, I think, kind of an alarming answer.
Well, I think this was an opportunity, like I mentioned. We're on the success we had, that winning streak was an opportunity to get some positivity around us and some feel good around us. But this game was an opportunity to kind of take all that and get to a whole other level. And I think the moment was too big.
The moment was too big. That's alarming. Not fatal, but alarming. Because everything about this game brought you right back to September, didn't it? Right? Baylor coming out, not really ready to play, making some key mistakes in terms of execution early in the game, making some boneheaded mistakes throughout the game, questions on the play calling, on both sides of the ball, questions about the coaching decisions. And then you look back and you hear that quote and you think about, there was some buildup to this game, mainly from Dave Aranda. Remember, he said a couple weeks ago, we're hunting for respect. This is an opportunity for us to go out and show the nation what we're all about against an SEC team, which is what everybody cares about. And we can go out there and we can earn some respect. And it just felt like all those games earlier this season and even parts of last season, the Colorado game, the BYU game are the ones that spring to mind where they were talking about, we were maybe just a bit too hyped up for this thing. I just don't like reverting back to those habits. It felt like we had gotten away from that. Baylor had gotten away from that. They won 6 straight games. They took it play by play, which I know sounds really cliche, but you could tell that they were not trying to do too much. And Yet it all kind of disintegrates after a couple weeks of preparation for a big-time game against a big-time SEC opponent. Now, I've wrestled with this quote, because my first thought was the Texas Bowl the lights should not be too bright. I'm not going to be one of those SEC guys who says, oh, this is meaningless, we don't even want to play in it. I like the Texas Bowl. It was a great opportunity to get a bunch of fans there in your own backyard against a good opponent, two good teams, not 6-6, two 8-4s. But like, that moment shouldn't be too bright. Sugar Bowl 1 against Georgia 5 years ago today, that's a moment that should be too bright, right, for that team. But then you also have to remember, you have to put this into context. Not making any excuses for the dumb mistakes throughout the game. That's inexcusable. But you also got to remember, this is a team that played in the armed forces. I mean, let's start here. There's one guy from the 2021 team, maybe two, Snacks, but of course he didn't play. Matt Jones, really the only guy from that Sugar Bowl 2 team. Because after that, you played in the Armed Forces Bowl. You won 3 games. And you've got a whole new team going into this bowl game against a big-time opponent. So maybe the lights were too bright. It shouldn't be, but I get it a little bit more than I did hitting the pillow last night after hearing that Dave Aranda quote. But you look at the numbers of this game and you look at the stats. In fact, my dad texted me after the game. He didn't watch the second half, but he says, I'm looking through the box score and I'm wondering how the hell Baylor lost this game by 2 touchdowns. Because, I mean, they didn't really get close. They kind of got close a couple of times. But I say you look at 1 for 6 on 4th down for a team that was playing for 4th down throughout the whole game for some reason. We'll talk about that. That's another segment. But they were 1 for 6 on 4th down. One of the 4th downs was a 36-yard loss. You had a punt return for a touchdown that cut it to, 7 or 6? And that got called back for a roughing the punter penalty. Just mistake after mistake. And that's not just on the execution of the players, but it's also the play calling. I thought was as bad as it had been since before the winning streak, and really probably since Sawyer Robertson became the starting quarterback. Sawyer himself did not have a great game, although set a career high in passing yards comfortably with 445. There was execution problems, but I think there was so many mental mistakes. And by the way, Dave really gave a good shout out to Micah Gifford, who had the penalty on the punt return. Sorry about that. That sounded gross. And saying he was a very valuable special teamer for them all year. And says he's going to play some defense. Came in as a wide receiver. This is the kid who was on Friday Night Tykes. But this was mental mistake after mental mistake for Baylor. So did LSU play a good enough game to win? Of course they did. Of course they did. They were the better team yesterday. Make no mistake. But yeah, that would have been a way different game if Baylor had their head screwed on right and was ready to play when the ball kicked off. But it wasn't, and they weren't. Brian Kelly, much as I hate to admit it, Brian Kelly might have been right about something on the Baylor side and something that Baylor really needs to address. We'll address that next on Locked on Baylor. But first, today's episode of Locked on Baylor is brought to you by our friends over at Game Time. If I get over this cold here, this flu, whatever it is, I'm going to be heading to Wrigley Field on Friday or Saturday, see some college hockey. I know you guys want to go out to the Foster Pavilion, see the Bears and the team formerly known as the Lady Bears. Well, Game Time is the only place I go to buy my ticket. Okay. Maybe you want to go to a college football playoff game. It's an incredible experience. You're going to want to do that through Game Time. It's got a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for events even easier. Filters out the fluff to show you only the incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Okay. I used it recently to find the tickets for that hockey game I want to go to. And just browsing through it, that was like a breeze. It was so much easier than any of the other ticket sites. I found great value for all kind of seats all around Wrigley Field. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE. That's LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices, and that's all, of course, guaranteed. went over the Brian Kelly bulletin board quote on Monday, the eve of the Texas Bowl, where he was talking about Dave Aranda and gave him like the classic backhanded compliment of, he plays this aggressive style. He had the personnel here at LSU. He does not have good enough personnel at Baylor. Basically saying the Bears did not have the talent to match their coach's genius. But then at the end, he gave the backhanded compliment and said, well, he's able to adjust and make some things happen. Isn't that what good coaches do? We knew what you meant, Brian. We knew what you meant. And while Baylor should have, and maybe was using it as bulletin board material, it didn't work. Didn't work. I said on the post game yesterday, you want to take a look at the Baylor secondary, you put a piece of bread in your toaster, send it to the highest setting, and then push the thing down, maybe even send it for a second go around in the toaster. That's how burnt they were on the defensive side. And I thought LSU, I said this on the post game too, and I'm sticking with it. Again, not a knock on LSU, but I thought LSU crushed Baylor in the first quarter. And then Baylor crushed Baylor after that. And that first quarter was so emblematic. I mean, LSU, they saw the weaknesses in Baylor's defense. I thought they were going to go screen game a bunch because Baylor's has struggled with that all year long, and they didn't need to. They went deep. In fact, they said, oh, Caden Jenkins, that's your best corner. Let's isolate him. Let's get him one-on-one. Let's pick on him all day. And they did. And it was like, I mean, we're sitting here almost throwing the clicker at the TV saying, how are we not getting anything, any scheme to avoid that, to avoid Chris Hilton one-on-one and Caden Jenkins? And of course, Chris Hilton was not one of their top 5 pass catchers on the year because 3 of the top 4 guys were not playing in this game, not playing. And Chris Hilton had 130 yards the whole season going into this game. He had 113 in the first half against Baylor. And a touchdown. I know there's some people, in fact, I'm seeing in some of the comments now, that there was a lot that was let go in terms of pass interference. And there was. I thought there was too much. I thought that Baylor had a real situation early in the second half. I think it was that first drive of the second half where there was a clear PI in the end zone that they didn't call. That would have set them up at the 2-yard line. Baylor ends up not scoring on that drive. But I'll say this, like, the standard was set pretty early. And it's not like Baylor got 10 PI calls against them. You know, the refs allowed them to play physical. I thought there was other problems with the refs that we'll get into in a few minutes. But LSU took advantage of that. And Baylor did not. So that's one where that comes down to, I mean, your coaching and your mentality. LSU said, oh, yeah, they're going to let us play back there on the back end. Let's play. And Baylor, I mean, they couldn't get hands on guys. I think it was the drive that put them up either 21-7 or 28-7. I think it's 21-7 because it was in the first quarter, where Nussmeier is flushed out of the pocket. It's the only time all day they flushed him out of the pocket. And he's throwing one away. It's a quick play, throwing one away. Everyone in the stadium thinks he's throwing the ball away, except for his receiver, who not only catches it, but gets 2 feet in bounds. Would have been good catch in the NFL. And no Baylor DBs anywhere to be seen. And then the next play, they score on a bomb touchdown. Like, I mean, I'm like, were these guys even ready to play? Like, they weren't even in the play. It was just not a good defensive performance from the defensive backfield specifically, but really all levels of the defense, because, you know, we talk about the pass rush and how that needed to kind of be resurrected in this game with a makeshift offensive line for LSU and both their offensive tackles out, and Baylor racked up 0 sacks. And again, didn't really get any pressure. The best play that was made by a pass rusher was Garmin Randolph dropping into coverage and getting a pick. That's a bad day at the office when the best play from your pass rusher was dropping into coverage and getting a pick. It's a good play by Garmin Randolph, but they were down Steve Linton in this game. Not a good enough excuse for Steve Linton, if we're being honest, but that's another segment. but you had a golden opportunity to kind of get some confidence back up for your pass rushers, and you didn't do it, and your secondary got exposed. And I kind of went off on Brian Kelly on Monday after that quote. I wasn't trying to say that Baylor's secondary was really good. In fact, I said in there it's not very good. But I looked at LSU's secondary and said it's also not very good, if not worse, by some of these metrics. And they don't give you trophies for this, but LSU secondary didn't stop Baylor all day. Like, that's a fact of life. That's a fact of the game. LSU secondary did not stop Baylor. And if Sawyer Robertson was on his game, even with all the mistakes that happened, Baylor had a real shot to be in there till the very end. But again, Sawyer was off. Sawyer was off in this game. He was missing open guys. He missed a couple in the first quarter that Sam Macho, the color guy, was talking about as bad misses. And those of you who watch every Baylor game, you'll know, like, with kind of that, it was the same way with the Browse offense. You look at the way the Spavital offense is run, like, you're going to have a couple of those per game, like 3 per game, with those deep balls where they just don't land near anybody. And those are a lot of option routes deep down the field. And so in the first quarter, I was like, okay, you just had a couple of those, but he missed some guys downfield the whole game. Hal Presley could have had a huge game. But there were missed throws in there. There were ones where Sawyer had happy feet and he was trying to get the ball out in weird ways. He could have thrown a couple picks in that game, but this was not a special LSU defense all year long. In fact, their secondary was pretty bad. Yeah, we actually got in a comment here. LSU has the worst secondary in the SEC, and Sage Green was not playing. So you had a depleted secondary back there that wasn't very good. And to be honest, Baylor just didn't take enough advantage of it. LSU took advantage of it. Garrett Nussmeier picked him apart. And that kind of became the difference in this game. Love you guys getting involved in the comments here. I've seen this one a few times. If y'all were in the SEC, you wouldn't even be in a bowl game. Bowl. Okay? This Baylor team, that's better than Oklahoma. And I know you LSU fans saw Oklahoma. Okay? This Baylor team is better than that. And probably better than Vanderbilt, who both beat Alabama. Yes, I mean, come on. Like, all right, the big mighty SEC. This was not a banner year for the SEC, by the way. I mean, it's always solid, but it was not. Like, 2 teams played themselves out of the playoff in the last couple of weeks against non-playoff teams. Alabama and Ole Miss played themselves out of the playoffs against Kentucky and Oklahoma. Like, don't try to tell me this is a great SEC year. Is the SEC better than the Big 12? Yes, but come on. Baylor could have absolutely been there in a bowl game. And it would have been great because they would have been playing some FCS school in November. So I think they absolutely would have been there in a bowl game. But Brian Kelly was right about that Baylor secondary. They missed Corey Gordon bad, I guess. And it definitely leads to, like, Baylor's going to need to address the cornerback position specifically because they've brought in some safeties, and I think good safeties, like good additions to this team. But you got to fix corner. Like, that was pretty evident yesterday. And you end up being without 2 of your starting corners, which really didn't help, with Snacks Johnson being academically ineligible and Corey Gordon hitting the transfer portal. But that is absolutely a position that you need to address because, by the way, you didn't have both those guys in this game. Neither of those guys are playing on your team next year. So LSU exposed that from Baylor. We already knew the pass rush was bad. They exposed that, but they really exposed just how much work you need to do on the secondary. And Dave Aranda did talk about that after the game. That's going to be on tomorrow's show of Locked On Baylor. But coming up, we're going to talk about how Baylor got absolutely hosed in this game. Thanks a lot, ACC. That's coming up next on Locked On Baylor. But first, it's a word from our sponsors at FanDuel. You might know it as America's #1 sportsbook. Well, there's also so much great sports going on right now, so much great football. NFL playoffs are almost here, but it's not too late to get in on the regular season action with FanDuel. Right now, new customers can finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins, okay? There's so many ways for you to win, by the way. Like even a football dummy like me, as you guys can probably tell, I win money through FanDuel. It's not just like, hey, who's going to win? What's the point spread? You can do anytime touchdowns, who's going to score the first touchdown, over under on this many touchdowns or this many points. There's so many ways to win money that even I can do it, okay? Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your chance at $250 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Baylor loses this one 44-31 to LSU. I do want you guys to know about the Big 12 squad. Some of you guys watch those Big 12 squad shows. I have a ton of fun with them. I didn't get to as many as I wanted to this year, but today, this afternoon, if you're watching this live on YouTube, we're going to have a post game for the Arizona State-Texas game. And you guys know my feelings about the University of Texas, so I'm excited to get on this one. We'll have some of the best and biggest names in the Big 12, so definitely tune into that. Tune into Locked On Big 12 to be kept a brief of whatever's going on around the league, especially with basketball, because now we turn our sights to basketball, and some of us, including me, need to catch up on that a little bit. So you got Locked On Baylor as your first listen every day. Make Locked On Big 12 your second. And if you've got some LSU fans in here still, listen to Mike, man. Locked On LSU is a really good show. I really enjoyed listening to that in preparation for this game. But the Bears lose it 44-31. And as I mentioned earlier, I mean, it was dumb mistakes. And when you watch the game, Baylor didn't really get back in it, but they had several shots to get right back in it, right? The punt return for a touchdown that's nullified. That's a big one that cuts it down to 7. But I'm looking at the first drive of the second half. Bears were down 3 scores going into the half, 34-17. They just added a field goal before the break, which could have been a touchdown. It was a goal-to-go situation, and you scored. It's still a 3-score game, and you come out in the second half and you have a heck of a drive, and you're down to the goal line, another goal-to-go situation. They go for it on 4th down, which the more I think about it, I'm okay with the call. But I just thought Baylor flip-flopped with their mentality of whether to kick and use the points or really put some pressure on them with the momentum. And they go for the end zone on 4th and 5. It's an overthrown ball. Ashton Hawkins is open, and Hawkins corrals it, puts a foot down in bounds, which is a touchdown in college football. And in fact, they rule it a touchdown on the field. It was close, don't get me wrong. In fact, when I first saw it, I screamed. I thought they missed it. And then when you see the replay and you saw the hands go up, you're like, oh, wow, that's a touchdown. They go to review, and inexplicably, it is overturned. I couldn't believe it. It was close, don't get me wrong, but it was a touchdown. If you're watching on YouTube, let's take a look at this picture from my man Josh Carson on Twitter. He's the guy who put the Baylor shirt over Gary Patterson's statue at TCU. Look at this photo. That foot is inbounds. And the ref has a beautiful view of it to see if the side of the foot was out of bounds or not. At most, at best, that is a definite touchdown. At worst, it is inconclusive, indisputable, disputable. That's the word I'm looking for. At best, it is a touchdown. I'm sorry, y'all. I'm sick, man. At worst, it is disputable. And when you call it a touchdown on the field, that needs to be indisputable video evidence. That right there, that is the textbook definition of disputable. Baylor got hosed on that call. The ACC refs hosed them. And I put a tweet out about it. I think it was after the next Ashton Hawkins touchdown, of how this game could have changed if that had been called. And I had an LSU fan tweet the final score graphic and crossed out the 31 and put the 38. I thought that was kind of funny. But if that becomes a touchdown, this is a different game. Okay? The momentum of that game shifts completely. And you've got the Garmin Randolph interception after that. Baylor goes down and scores. that is a brand new ball game. Baylor could be taking the lead there. But instead, it's 2 goal-to-go situations on either side of the half, and you only get 3 points. And while Baylor should have executed better, no doubt, because by the way, that 3rd down call before the 4th down pass was a terrible play call. Everyone was out of sorts. But if the ACC refs knew what real football was and who real athletes were, this is a completely different game. Does Baylor win it? I don't know. Probably not. I don't know. But that totally changes the complexion of the game there. It absolutely does. And it goes to show that any call at any point in the game could have huge ramifications for the end because, there were points scored after that. There was plenty of football to be played after that. Baylor made plenty of mistakes after that. But that was a touchdown, and it could have absolutely changed the complexion of this game and could have changed momentum, could have changed the confidence on that sideline, could have changed play calls throughout the game. A lot changes if that gets called correctly. And the shame of it is, it was called correctly at first. And then the ACC refs, they go to the monitor and somehow say that's not a touchdown. That is a touchdown. Anyway, it's close. It's not like, oh my gosh, it's close, but that is a touchdown. Anyway, I do want to know from you guys. This is my last loser mentality thing of the episode. But I heard post game that there was not just a great Baylor crowd, but more Baylor than LSU. I'd love to hear from those of you who were at the game. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to go. It was a bummer for me to miss it. But that reminds me of Sugar Bowl 1, which didn't change anything. Like Georgia still handled Baylor, but I was stunned going to that game in New Orleans that Baylor had so many more fans than Georgia did in that game. And when you walked on the streets of New Orleans leading up to that, it was like 10-1 Baylor to Georgia fans. So anyway, it doesn't matter. It doesn't change the outcome of the game or anything, but let me know. LSU is a huge brand and obviously a great program. It would be really cool to see that Baylor fervor if they were able to overtake the LSU fans in there. Let me know down in the comments below. Let me know what you thought was the big difference in this game. Definitely get that down in the comments below. Let me know what you thought Baylor did wrong, what LSU did right, and how Baylor can build off this, because that's something we're going to talk about in the next few days as well. If you love the show, like it. If you hate the show, like it anyway. If you love me, leave a comment. If you hate me, leave a comment, please. Helps out a lot. Be sure to like and subscribe, ring that notification bell to get notified every time we're dropping videos here on YouTube. And then, of course, wherever you get your podcast. Thank you so much for making it your first listen today and every day. Let's keep the positive vibes up in 2025. We will see it later on your favorite show, Locked On Baylor.